And so we're going to today just talk about some ways to gain some deeper understandings of reading comprehension and learn some new strategies, hopefully, that you can just take and start using. So first I want you to think about what skills are needed to comprehend what we have read. So like, what do you actually have to do to comprehend what you have read? And if you want to write it down on your paper there, just jot some ideas down. Anything I have, I will send to you if you want it, if you just email me. So please feel free to write on what you have. But just jot down. It's on the first page here that's got my name at the top. What skills are needed to comprehend text? Okay, usually what I have people do then is share in a small group, and then we share a large group. But since our large group is a small group, we'll just kind of go from there. What are some things that you wrote down? What do we have to do to comprehend text? Okay, we need to know vocabulary.
Yeah. I wrote same thing, but I wrote definition of words.
Okay.
And then prior knowledge.
Prior knowledge. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I wrote down all of my group IT special ed.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So just basically sequencing,
Mm-hmm.
being able to, the main idea, the details.
Right. Okay. So definitely characteristics that impact comprehension. You kind of have a little fill in the blank there on your guide, but we need those phonological decoding skills and those word recognition skills. We need oral language abilities, including vocabulary, some things that you guys talked about. We need short-term and working memory abilities. We have to remember what we just read, and when we get to the end of a longer piece of text, we have to be able to remember what we read at the beginning as well as what we read at the end. We need that background knowledge that you guys mentioned. And along with that background knowledge, we need that ability to link it with new learning, that new learning with our previous learning that we have, an ability to attend to the text, stay engaged, and respond to the text. So if they can't stay focused with what they're reading, they will have, as you know, comprehension issues. My son, when he reads, he'll read a paragraph and then he'll talk to me about a baseball game, and then he'll come back and try to read again. And I'm like, no, let's stay focused on what we are trying to read. So they need to be able to do all of those things in order to really comprehend what they are learning. And I've got these particular points out of this book called 50 Nifty Activities for the 5 components of reading and the 3 tiers of reading instruction. It's by Judith Dotson. It's an excellent book that is filled with activities that you can do for the 5 components of reading. So if you have kids on intervention plans and they're missing that phonological awareness, they're missing, they need work with syllables, lots of activities in here. This is an excellent book that you can use. This is a chart called The Simple View of Reading. Have you ever seen this particular chart? This is what really opened my eyes as a middle school teacher. Basically what it says is that we need decoding times language comprehension to get to reading comprehension. And the multiplication symbol is key, because if you're missing any one of these, if it's a 0, if you multiply something by 0, you're going to get 0. So if they can't decode the words, they don't have that phonics and phonological awareness down, we're not going to get to reading comprehension. The same thing with language comprehension. If they're missing that vocabulary, they can read all of the words, but if they don't know what the word means, we're not going to get to that reading comprehension. And the part that really struck me as a middle school teacher is this quote: "No comprehension strategy is powerful enough to compensate for the inability to read the words." And so with our older students that I work with, if, I keep throwing comprehension strategies at them, well, let's try this and let's try this, they need phonics skills. And so we actually have she's a former kindergarten teacher who's our Title I reading teacher, who they go and she does the same test that you guys do, 6th grade, kindergarten with our kids to figure out what deficits they have. And that's where she goes back and she works with them to try to meet them where they're at. So we just really have to think about where are our kids at and what can we do to help them then. So, yes.
What kinds of things does she do? Does she do individualized instruction? Does she do small group?
She has small group. Usually we identified them based off of their OCCT scores, their STAR reading scores, teacher recommendations, and then she does like the surveys with them, or she uses really great reading a lot, or Dibbles. She'll even use that with them to determine where they're at, and then she kind of places them in groups, and so she's got some groups, and they do kind of some center things and rotate through. And she uses a lot of the really great reading materials, 95% group materials to meet them where they're at, to help them. So, and those are kids that probably were on, APPs and, and all of those things that we just need to meet them where they're at. And I teach a co-taught class. And I had students last year, my special ed students, they came to me pre-primer, first grade, second grade level in the 6th grade, and I would go back and we tried to do some grouping. We had a para and we had a teacher, but it was time and correct intervention and a person to work with them. And we went back and we were doing that because I asked my principal, I said, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to move them, or do you want me to practice what they're going to have on a test that they can't read? And she's like, move them. Just as much as you can, move them. And so I'm fortunate that my district has that mindset and my administrator has that. But that's just kind of what we do with them. So for comprehension strategies, we need to work before, during, and after. Comprehension strategies, we need some sort of combination of the three. Preview, set the purpose. During, we need to make sure we stop and check, don't go too quickly. And after, we need that recall and evaluate with them. So for our standards, Mrs. Jackson wanted me to kind of focus on standards 2 and 3. So our standard 2, the kind of the overarching standard, it's the reading and writing process. Students will use a variety of recursive reading and writing processes. And what that word recursive means is that we're always coming back to it. You don't ever... With math, sometimes once you've learned this, you move on, and it's a building block. But with reading and writing, I might do a summary of a fiction story, but then I'm going to do a summary. I need to use those summarization skills to do nonfiction, and now I'm going to look at poetry. So we're always having to come back, and a lot of the standards look similar at different grade levels, but the thing is we've got that increasingly complex text. So a summary with a second grade story is going to be different than a summary with a 6th grade story. And that's what's hard for some people to remember and think about sometimes. But we're going to look at first this sequencing. So in kindergarten, students will sequence the events or plot of a story with or text with guidance and support. In 1st grade, we take off that guidance and support. And then in 2nd grade, it moves from sequencing to summarizing events or plots of a story or text. So we've got them at those lower levels. Let's just put things in order, and then we're actually going to start trying to summarize in 2nd grade. And remember, with our standards, they are end-of-the-year standards. So by the end of 2nd grade, this is what they should be able to do. That doesn't mean that we're not going to go back and do some sequencing, because we do need to do that. That's a step on that path. So when you look at it, sometimes teachers, well, I can't, it's August or it's September and they can't do that. Just remember, it's what I needed by the end of the year, and there's steps you're going to go backwards to get to that point. So just always keep that in mind with our standards. One thing that I like is a strategy that I like. It's called a retelling bracelet. And the picture that I found for this, they use the green to start, and then they want 3 details, and then they use the red to end their retelling. And it helps students. I didn't put it on a bracelet. I just put it on, it's a fuzzy stick, a pipe cleaner, and I put the 3 different beads. And so if a student is holding this was for the younger students, we were just going to do 1 detail. What happened at the beginning, what happened at the middle, what happened at the end. And so if they're holding on to this and they're telling a partner what just happened, I physically am going to move it when I tell you one thing, because some students will tell you one thing. That's what happened. Another student is going to remember everything and tell you every single thing that happened. But if they have something like this, it's just that I always have them practice first. So think to yourself, what am I going to say first? What am I going to say second? What am I going to say third? And then they can tell that to a partner. So just having something tactile that they can focus on really helps them with their retelling. So something very simple. The bracelet, I was having more issues with when I did this with younger kids, because you got to put the bracelet on and then getting it to move. So I just kind of knotted the ends, and it's worked really well for the kids. And then it's easy to take it off and add more beads. Like, so at a 2nd grade, I would probably have more details, and I would want to add some beads because they need to tell more details. Kindergarten, we're just going to go, we're going to go beginning, middle, and end, and that's what we're going to do. So just something to help them focus on. I need to have these parts. So a retelling bracelet or a retelling stick is really easy for students to use, and it's really easy and very cheap to make as well. So something you can do. When we're going to go into doing something like this, we talk about bundling the standards, because when you look at the ELA standards, you think about an activity you do, you're like, well, it fits this, and it fits this, and it fits this. And so sometimes you have to focus on, okay, what's my focus? Mm-hmm. But with most of them, we can add in those speaking and listening standards. So if I am working with a partner and I'm retelling them, we are also working on, like, students will actively listen and speak using agreed upon rules for discussion with guidance and support. Students will work respectfully with others with guidance and support. And so we're always, you're always working on those as well. But when you're doing your lesson plans, don't forget that you can add those speaking and listening standards in. We put them at the beginning of the standards on purpose, because if you think about language and how things work, we first speak. Babies first learn to speak. That's one of the most important things that we need to do and to work on. And before, in past, our speaking and listening were at the back of the standards. And it actually was the reading standards, then the grammar and writing standards, and then the speaking and listening. And I came to Oklahoma in 2006, and I was actually told when I first started looking at them, I had teachers tell me, well, you're the English teacher, so you work on the English, and the speaking and listening, it's not tested, so you don't have to really worry about it. And it's one of the most important things. We do need to worry about it. So when we created the standards, we said this has got to be up front. So anytime you can get your kids actively engaged in discussions and teaching that procedure, how to do that. So I could bundle, if I'm working on sequencing or if I'm working on summarizing and I use something like this, I can bundle that with one of my speaking and listening standards and how I'm working in a group with the students. Sequencing, what students can do is they can draw 4 pictures on an index card from the important parts of the story. They can add, depending on their level, add sentences explaining which part of the story they illustrated, and then put them in order. So if you give them time, maybe it's at a center time or something, they've got those pieces. Again, you can add in however many that you want them to have, and then they can exchange it with a partner. Can you put this in order then? Do you know what I'm talking about? But just getting them, a lot of your stories will come with sequence cards that you can use with students, but this, just having them do it on their own, that's also then a quick formative assessment. Did they understand each part of the story? And it's something that they would enjoy doing as well. Or they could make it and then take it home and tell it to their parents, or that could be an activity that they do as well.
So I have a question.
Yes.
Okay, so you've got the kid that just is going to take forever
Mm-hmm.
on the card.
Mm-hmm. So then you can.
Well, I was thinking if you work in small groups with your students, then maybe assign each student a part. To,
Yeah.
Yeah. Even with kindergarten, you could have each student draw part of the story, and then they can dictate to you what they want to say about the picture. Because I was thinking, I teach second grade, and so with my small group, I have four reading groups in the classroom. I would assign each student a part to illustrate, and then have the other students maybe add a sentence to that picture, and that way everyone is helping with that. I don't know, I'm just thinking about that. Sorry.
No, please. And sometimes too, I'll set timers for my kids, and I'll tell them you can't set timers. Okay, so and yeah, it's like with mine, I will tell them, like, we're doing something artistic, I just need you to have like an idea down. I'm not hanging these in a museum, to work on it. But if you do have that student who would get so caught up in the details of it, then maybe this part would not be, like the drawing would not be for them, but you could ask them and write down, write down what they said, or if you or maybe you would have the cards already with some pictures, and then they could tell you what was happening there as the beginning, middle, and end. Yes, you definitely have to modify it for your students, because I as well would have a student who would be on their first card the entire time and not get to the rest of them. So, think about, do that with the ones that would work with. The ones that it doesn't, then you find something else that they can work with. So just another different activity for sequencing, having them do the work so they're a little bit more engaged than just giving them the sequencing cards. But some weeks you just have to give them the sequencing cards. It just depends on your story and what's happening in that story. Or if that was your focus that week, then maybe spend a little bit more time and let them do something like the sequencing cards. Another that we can bundle with that as well with the sequencing cards. So if we're sequencing, we're summarizing, and we're working with a partner, we can also bundle the sentences. So if we're going to add the writing to that sequencing card, then we've got the writing standard. So in kindergarten, they're beginning to compose simple sentences. Maybe you get them as far as you can. At the beginning of the year, you're transcribing. By the end of the year, they could be writing some of their own sentences. Second grade, they're working on writing complete sentences to their cards, or maybe you're not doing the picture part of it. Maybe if you're towards the end of second grade, you're focused on, I just want some writing on the note card, and I'm looking at your sentences. So with this, one activity of sequencing, we've got the sequencing summarization, we've got the oral language with that, and we can bundle it then with the writing. So when you're thinking about your activities, if you're struggling with the standards, see how they kind of all fit in together and what you can pull in for those. One important thing I think to do is to teach comprehension strategies without the text first. Practice the strategy without those demands of decoding. So get them to understand the strategy and what you want them to do with pictures before you're asking them to read the text as well, especially for our struggling readers. We need them to understand how to do some of these things, but when I add that text in there, I'm just done. I'm not going to think anymore. And so when we think about, let's see, which one is this? Okay, standard 2 again. So if we're retelling or reenacting major events from a read aloud with guidance and support to recognize the main idea. We're talking about main idea now. First grade, they're going to retell or react major events in a text, focusing on importance of detail to recognize the main idea. Again, we've taken out the guidance and support, so by the end of first grade, they should be doing that on their own. And then in second grade, they're going to locate the main idea and supporting details of a text. And so I like how the standards now are building upon each other. If you're ever not sure what your standard means exactly, or like what are they exactly looking for, always look at the standard before, the grade level before, and the grade level after to kind of see where yours fits, because then you can see here they've not had to locate it themselves before. So that's in second grade, that's what you're teaching, but you should know, okay, they should be able to find the details to support the main idea in first grade. So it's that building. So really look at your standards, the grade level before and the grade after, to kind of see where you fit in. This is one of my favorite activities to do with kids. It's a hard picture to see, but it's called a main idea bag. And it's just a Ziploc bag, and inside of the Ziploc bag are different pictures. So here is like a bicycle and a motorcycle and a car and a bus and an airplane. So you tell them, if we want to find the main idea is kind of what everything's about. So what would the main idea of this bag be? And they can go through and, oh, that main idea is transportation, or how I get places, and then talk about all of the different things that it could be. This main idea bag has a donut, I think there's like a Pop-Tart, Quakes in here. So this could be breakfast food. So the main idea of this is breakfast food, and all of the things that fit in that bag are the details that give us the main idea. So something like a main idea bag is good for students to work on after you've practiced doing this categorization. Because if you think on Bloom's, where categorization is, it's a top level of Bloom's as we're working. So what I usually do with my students to start them is I would just show them a picture up on the screen. So we're all talking about it. You know, what is this? And I always have them, in second grade, I think they could do this. Your students would just maybe have to think. I always have them write it down first, just jot some things down, because otherwise if I said, what's the main idea of this? You may raise your hand every time, and you know that, so I'm not even going to think about it. But if I have to have a minute, or I have to share with a partner what I think, give them that minute to process, that makes everybody more engaged. So kids will say, this is vegetables, or this is a salad, or foods I don't like, you know, and you talk about all of the different categories that it could be, and then you write them down on the board, and you can say, okay, well now what do we think the best one for this would be? And it might be foods I don't like, you know, and then you could talk about, well, depending on your story, maybe it is. Maybe you're writing a paragraph about all of the foods that you don't like, or all the vegetables you don't like. I've done it with breakfast. Sports. They like this one. They come up with different things for this. So it's art supplies. It's art class. It's, you know, being creative. And so let them brainstorm and give them time to think about what all of these different categories could be. Party, birthday party. You know, a lot of times they'll say party, and then we'll talk about, well, can you be a little bit more specific? Because we don't want our main ideas to be too broad. Now, if you see a cake with candles, usually what does that mean? Oh, well, that's a birthday cake. Okay, well, could we say maybe it's a birthday party because of this one detail that's added in there? That's going to change things. So you're working on these difficult concepts with pictures first. And again, transportation. Sometimes they'll say things with wheels. Oh, things with wheels. And I'll be like, oh, wait. What are these details down here? We can't say it's things with wheels because we've got some pictures on here that don't have wheels on them. Oh, okay. So, and that's when I talk to them about, you have to look at the whole picture. When you're reading, you have to read all of the sentences, because you might have a boat in one of the sentences, and then you can't tell me it's things with wheels, because I'm going to think you're crazy, because boats don't have wheels, you know. So, or this type of boat anyway, because then someone will say, well, you know, something different. But so then you talk about how you have to look at all of the pictures, and you can't just glance at it. Like when we're reading, you can't just glance at it. So that's kind of one strategy. I would do a whole group lesson like this on the board, and then I would move to the main idea bags and let them maybe write it down, and they can switch bags, or then that becomes a center activity once they've worked with it. But students generally like that, and honestly, I've used this with my sixth graders before, because we need to go back and focus on, just as a reminder, what is main idea? do it much more quickly with them than I would with the younger kids, but it's still something that works with the older students as well. Yes.
Also to help them, and I for me, to get them thinking about the main idea, I do picture walk for the story.
Yes.
And say, what do you think the story is going to be about?
Right.
You know, just from the title or questions that I may ask before we read the story. And that's to get them thinking about what the main idea is.
Right. And that goes back to our comprehension strategy of, we need to preview, or what do we do before reading to help us as we're reading. This is one of my favorite strategies. It's just a puzzle. Finding the main idea we need to remember requires putting a lot of individual pieces together, and some of those pieces are more important than others. So as we're reading, we have to discern, okay, what's really important, and how does that fit into the big picture? And once all of the pieces are revealed and understood is when that big picture will be in place. And I have a video of this lady explaining her strategy. So I want to show that to you because I think it's really powerful. I would use this as an anchor activity, something then that I can refer back to as I'm teaching later in the year.
Okay, so this is an idea I've been trying to play with to give kids an idea of the concept of main idea. So this is kind of like a thinker lesson that you can do. So I found this puzzle with target, and these are also the little push-up. To do this puzzle, you just have something that's got targeted activity going on around it. And so I got these. This one is one for market money. So you want to get the puzzle, and you may want to glue it together so you can put it in the easel for a larger lesson. The next thing that I do is that I cover the entire puzzle, all the different pieces or activities that are going on. I cover those up with post-it notes. The next thing is I'll peel off one post-it note and pose the question, okay, so let's name what we actually see going on. So you don't want kids to predict here. We want them to just say, okay, so this is the part we see there's a fish swimming in the water. I'll cover it back up, and then I'll cover the next piece. So like up here is where the sailboat is swimming, sailing in the ocean. As I keep continuing to do this, here the snail is digging, and playing in the sand. So you want to keep continuing this throughout the whole puzzle where you're going to cover each piece, name what's going on, and then cover it back up. After you've done that, then you come back to the beginning, and you are going to uncover the fish swimming and say, so we wanted to name what this whole puzzle was about, what our whole picture was about. Could we say that the whole piece is about the fish swimming in the water? And then the kids are like, no. And we're like, no, that's a corner piece. So you want to use that. That's the reason the puzzle is to try to anchor the idea of a puzzle piece and not a corner piece. So we just want to tell them, no, that's a corner piece. And then I'll go and cover the next layer. So could we say that our whole piece, if we step back with our whole picture, is the whole picture about aesthetics and emotion? You're like, no. And I'm like, nope, that's a corner piece. So you want to keep peeling each layer and asking the kids, could we say our whole picture is about that one thing? And when they say no, you say, so it's not a corner piece. So you really sort of help them understand that, each of those is really a corner piece, but it doesn't mean the whole thing. And then, by the time you get back to the end where you uncover everything, you can say, so then, if we want to just step back and say, what was our whole picture? Then we can name it. If we can name it something like, the animals were at the beach on a warm sunny day plane. They're like, yeah, that's the whole piece. And we could just say, well, that's the main idea. Main idea is stepping back and saying, what's the whole picture, not a corner piece. So then, after doing this, you may want to practice with taking some familiar, picture books or whatever that you've read and reread a paragraph and maybe give them multiple choices, A, B, C, D. Could we say that this whole paragraph was about, A, B, C, or D? Then when you get to the point for tax, when it says paragraph 7 is mainly about, teaching them to go back and reread that paragraph or paragraphs very carefully and envision it. And so after they step back, what's in the whole paragraph? When they look at the answer choices, they need to be asking themselves, was that my whole picture, with a decor piece and look for the best answer. Not necessarily the right, but which one that they have listed as the best. So it's kind of what I've been trying out with kids. I'm still trying to sharpen it, but this might be a good idea if you want to try it out too and give everybody feedback on how it's going.
And so I really like that because I love anchor activities that I can refer back to throughout the whole year. And I really think that idea of it being a piece of a puzzle will stick with kids. And even how she had the pieces, like if you had it on your board, you could add a puzzle piece. You could say which is a piece of the puzzle, which is just a detail and not the main idea, so that they can go through and really be looking at it. So this would be something that I would try to do, like at the beginning of when we're talking about main idea, so that I can always just ask them, was that a piece of the puzzle? Is that a detail? Or is it my whole puzzle? Is it my main idea? And I think that they can connect that. So we've worked on that difficult comprehension task of finding the main idea, because it is hard, finding that main idea without any text at all. And so now they have got a better understanding of what that means. So I really enjoy this activity for that purpose, because I've eliminated all the text, and now I can go back in and say, okay, what's just a piece of what we're looking for? So then she's just got these, because sometimes the internet doesn't work, so then I just have to go back. And I think the important part that she said was not to predict and not to make up a story. So like when you just showed the fish, don't make up a story. This is not a fish swimming in the ocean and he's, lost. This is a fish next to the beach, and so they can only talk about what's in the puzzle. Just like when we're reading a story, we're not going to add other details in. So that's a key piece there when we're talking about that. Finding evidence. Second graders especially need to kind of start finding that evidence, and that's requiring students to go back to the text to respond to the questions or comments. Thinking about what did the author say to make you think that. Where is that in the text? What are your clues? So asking the kids all of those questions as they're reading is going to get them to go back into the text, and just always making them go back and find their evidence. So I want to give you, just shared several strategies with you. I just want to give you a second to kind of self-reflect and think about how you could use this. There's some white space there on your paper. Jot down some ideas, what you're thinking. Sometimes I know it just may spark a different idea, and it's completely different from what I've just shared with you, but go ahead and just take a couple minutes to jot down some ideas. One thing that has helped me when I work with younger students for sharing, because when you have a group of kindergartners or first graders or second graders, everybody wants to share immediately. Like you ask a question and they're either blurting out or their hands are in the air and it takes forever. You can't get to everybody, but you want everybody to have that chance to share. So I started something, I just call it a talking stick. My daughter and I made these kind of fancy, so they kind of look like microphones, but I've also just used a craft stick and just written talking stick on it. And it becomes whoever has the talking stick is the person who gets to talk. So if I have a partner and I pass these out, you're my listener because I'm talking. So after I finish sharing, then I'm going to pass it to you, and then you get to share. And then the next time a question, you just hold on to it because I'm going to ask another question. And then the next time you ask a question, you get to start. And it's because you're holding it, and then you share, and then you hand it back to me, and then I get to share. So if you've got that class, or if it's your second graders at the beginning of the year, or with your students, and they all want to share, and then they're going to argue over who gets to share first, so they both talk at the same time, just something simple that I'm holding on to this, and it can be a pencil, it can be whatever, but it's helped when I've gone into classrooms, and I know because I'm a guest teacher sometimes they act a little bit differently, but teachers have said, well, they've taken that and used it, especially procedural at the beginning until they learn that they need to take turns. And that goes all to standard 1 with learning to collaborate with people, learning to the group rules, those types of things. So it might not be something you would use all year long, but it would be something to teach them that we have to take turns, because especially those kindergartners love to just all shout out at the same time. And then it helps because everybody's participating, because if I'm next to my partner, if we're having carpet time and we're all sitting there, I know who my partner is and we both get to share, so I don't get to just zone out. Or it will help your shy kids. If I just have to tell one person, then maybe I will say something. And what happens a lot of times then, after they've all got the chance to get it out, you can then call on groups. What's something your group shared? And a lot of times, especially if you have that shy kid, they'll say, well, Susie had this great idea, and she said, and instead of saying what I had said, I'll share Susie, and so that will help build her confidence a little because kids are accepting and realizing her idea. So something super simple, just a management thing that I found I needed after I went in, and I was like, holy cow, everybody wants to share at the same time. So I just use a little talking stick for them. Another little strategy for answering inferential questions, so second grade level, working with inferencing, the how and the why. You guys have it in second grade is where it's really starting with guidance and support. And so if you're thinking end of the year first grade, knowing that in second grade they're going to have to be doing that might be something we can start working on just a little bit, but it's a big skill to be able to inference. And so just an anchor chart like this, making inferences, we take our picture, we take our schema, and that equals our inference. So just using that same language, this picture shows, I already know that, therefore I can infer, and it really helps the students like at grade levels, if everybody in the grade levels using the same language, and then you let the teachers know at the next grade level, they can do this, but these are the words I use. Because I found if you don't have that communication with vertical alignment, my third grade teachers will tell me sometimes, well, the kids can write, multi-paragraph reports or essays, and then the fourth grade teacher will come, well, they can't write anything, they don't know how to write a sentence. And I'm like, did you talk? Because they can do it at the end of third grade, so they can do it in fourth grade. What language are you using? And sometimes it's just saying one word, and you got to find that word. So one way to help make inferences is I use pictures again, because it's a hard skill. So if you look at this picture shows, when I look at this picture, I see someone on her cell phone, and somebody's giving her a not very nice look, and it looks like they might be, I'm using what I know, it looks like they might be maybe at a movie theater, and I know you're not supposed to talk at a movie theater, so therefore I can infer she's getting in trouble because she's talking on her cell phone at a movie theater, and all with pictures and all of those higher level skills that they need. Here's one too. So again, the picture shows, just what does the picture show? A boy is eating his dinner. It looks like there's some vegetables on his plate, and he does not have a happy look on his face. I already know that not all little kids like to eat vegetables. I know that if I have this look, I'm not happy. So therefore, I can infer the boy is not happy about his dinner, or the boy doesn't like his dinner. All using this from pictures, getting those clues. So then I can move it into, when we have text, if it said, she said crying, or she said with an unhappy tone, or the words they're choosing. They're starting to pick out those clues then for the inferencing, and talking then about tone a little bit with that. So here's one, kind of some ugly feet, but I think, the kids like it. So the picture shows the kids, somebody with ugly feet, somebody who has some parts of their feet are red, parts of it is white. They have a Band-Aid on. I know that shape is from a flip-flop. I know that that sunburn hurts. Therefore I can infer that this person was wearing flip-flops and got sunburned, and their feet probably hurt right now. Just taking all of those things with pictures first. Talking about with sentences. I've got tons of stuff I just want to share. We've got just a couple minutes left. But sentence meaning, if you really think about it, students have to be able to understand a sentence before we can ask them to understand a paragraph. So if they're struggling telling you what just happened in that sentence, we shouldn't be moving on, okay, we'll read the whole paragraph and tell me what was there, because I need to understand that sentence first. One thing that students really like to do, and depending on the level, these cards just have they have a subject on them, so they have a picture with a word underneath it. Then they have your verb, and then they kind of have the preposition. They have where, and so the kids just randomly take a card. They have to have each one, and you can have a sentence stem written down for them. So this sentence says, "The boy sings at the house." Does that make sense? Can we have a boy that sings at the house? Okay, so that one makes sense. Then I might choose another card. This one, I have "The frog flies at the beach." Is that a silly sentence? Oh, that's a silly sentence, and they just think that that's hilarious then. And, can that really happen? No, that can't really happen. So like with the younger kids, they really like this. I like to have them color-coded. This was an example. But again, the subject would be green. Then we can have a different color in the middle, and the end can be red. So we've got that stop or go and stop sequence with the kids. So putting together just word cards with sentences, does that make sense? So with the younger ones, or if you've got ESL students who don't know, who need extra help with the language, the card with the picture and the word is really going to help those students out. And then for older students, I have some that just have words on them, so some simple sentences. So the first one, "The man ate worms in the big puddle." Does that make sense? Well, that's gross. No, that doesn't make sense. But they're working on creating sentences. "The student ate cookies on the bike." That could happen. I don't know if you should eat and ride a bike, but that could happen. So getting them to put sentences together and decide if it's a meaningful sentence or if it's a silly sentence, that's comprehension. Did I just understand that sentence? I have to understand what the sentence is telling me in order to decide if it's a silly sentence or if it's a sentence that makes sense. And then if it's in a center type situation, they could illustrate their picture as well. So that's just something fun that they can do, because they in their center, because then they have to draw it as well. And there's just some different places that people have had some silly sentences, different ways that they've done it. Strips, they've used pocket charts. They've added, if you're doing more with grammar, each color represented a different part of speech, and so they knew that they had to have all of those different colors in it. And she's got a color code here as far as what that meant in her classroom. But and then I also love that she's got the punctuation cards so that we remember to put the punctuation there. If we're working on more complex sentences, we can add more in, or depending on where your kids are at, you can differentiate that for them. Another way to do it is to have them on the cubes, have all different things on the cubes, so they have to roll the cubes, and then that becomes their sentence. And this is kind of what I meant by having a template or something, and if you've got it in a page protector, they can use the dry erase marker if they've got centers or something like that. So we have the clown ate a fly, silly sentence that they can work on. And just another thing I saw on Pinterest was another way to say it, possible or impossible sentences. So if your second graders are too mature for silly sentences, maybe we've got possible and impossible sentences just to up the vocabulary a little bit with them. Another way to use that. So with students, children are naturally curious. We need to teach them how to ask questions. Give them those stems. I wonder, what if, just like she was talking about this morning, why, how could, and so to teach them after they've read to ask those questions about what's there for them. So we know comprehension is complex, ongoing, and cyclical. We need foundational decoding skills, background knowledge, explicit instruction, constant monitoring, and frequent practice with the kids. And on your paper, I have a 3-2-1. We don't have to fill that out today, but that's something you can always use with students, kind of an exit ticket. 3 things they learn, 2 questions they have, just a comment they have. I change those up all the time. If we just read a story, I might write down 3 things that happened in the story, 2 questions you have, something you're wondering about, or just a comment. If we didn't get the whole story finished, I make that a prediction a lot of times. So if we've been reading, if you read out loud to your kids, maybe that's something you could do at the end of the novel that you're reading with them and have them write down, what's 3 things that happened? What are you wondering about? What's a prediction? Just to get them thinking about it. So you have my information. Time goes really quickly. If you have any questions, you can just always email me. And if you want copies of anything, I can send you copies. My email address is on there. Just email me, say, hey, I was in the K2 session, and please send me what you got. So, okay. Thank you.
Great. Have you taught primary grades before?
I have taught 3rd through 8th. And then when I was a REACH coach, most of our training was on pre-K through 2, like learning to read, foundational things. And so I've done lots of workshops and had an opportunity to go in classrooms and model different lessons. So lots of fun. Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.